I always do this. I do it gently. So, welcome. So today, contemplating. Now, this session has arisen out of the 1960s father of nonviolent action, Marshall Rosenberg, and I'm going to link this into Friday's practice, where we're going to look at fierce compassion and Martin Luther King. And I am sort of linking it to the Black Lives Movement and how this can relate to ourselves, but also how we can turn our own anger into something quite positive, and what is underneath anger, and anger being an unmet need. So what do I mean by this? Marshall Rosenberg, who is the father of nonviolent action, you can actually go, I think there's a website, I think it's called cnvc.org, and you can find lots of stuff about him on a tube. Quotation, every act of violence is an unmet need. So this sort of grew out of me watching sort of like some of the riots that have been taking place and some of the anger in relation to the death of George Floyd, and the way that systematic trauma within the Black community has the idea of them being not valued, not listened to, not respected, and not loved. Their act is a reaction to that unmet need. Does that make sense? So then I started thinking about, how does that relate to us as an individual? Because I am going to talk about fierce compassion, and I am going to talk about when we feel angry in the face of social injustice, or our own feelings of social injustice, what can we do about it? And I think this is a very rich topic that is in a philosophical way, but also a very interesting topic that commands a rich deep dive. Self-compassion and anger, Buddha talks about it a lot. I think there is the famous quote, it probably isn't even Buddha, probably not said it, but there's two different versions of it. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else, and obviously you end up getting burnt. Or the quote where holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. So what actually happens is your anger against somebody else, they don't know anything about it, but you're actually, it has more effect on you eventually, more than it does on the other person. So this poison hot coal metaphor is quite interesting, because I think there's a quote, I don't know who said it, anger corrodes the vessel that contains it. So too much anger can harden a person into bitterness and resentment, and can cause chronic stress and disease. I do actually know somebody who was probably the most angry, bitter person that I've probably ever met. And her life was very short. It was almost like she was so consumed by that anger, it poisoned her very soul, and she became very, very ill and passed away. And it was quite sad, really, but even to the very end, she was unforgiving to the person that caused her the anger, and the person who wanted to see her in her last few days probably wanted to seek closure and forgiveness, and she refused to see that person. And it was quite sad, really. It was quite sad that that is how that person's life ended, that they left this mortal coil just seething with anger and bitterness and hatred and thoughts of vengeance. It's quite sad, isn't it? Now, so what is anger? Anger really isn't just really anger. Anger is caused by disconnection, and it's caused by being rejected and dismissed. And anger is, if we talk about the psychological aspect of anger is fundamentally a self-protective function of your fight-flight mechanism, isn't it? Your amygdala, your reptile brain. It is a protective function to stop people from overstepping the boundaries, to energise and deter threat, to stop harmful, toxic things damaging you. So there is positives in anger once they're controlled, like when we're going to do fierce compassion, where we're going to try and channel it there are some positives in anger because it can fuel change. And you think about all the famous movements, such as the 60s and 1968 and student rights in Paris, and you think about all these amazing, you think about the suffragettes and the way that they use their anger, but you think about all the anger, all these unmet needs, in South Africa and the ANC and Northern Ireland and the women's rights movement, and all this anger that's not contained properly can overstep a little bit. And it is about an unmet need because they're not being listened to, they're not validated, and they're not respected, because all of these movements have been driven by this idea of disconnection and oppression. So in a way, I'm sort of saying there might be an aspect of you having unmet needs and being oppressed in some way. And I'm only talking about this from a women's point of view, because when I'm going back to the Medusa metaphor, women are socialised to be nice. You're not allowed to be angry. So when a woman's angry, there is a more societal negative reaction. Now with men, because they're not allowed to show soft feelings and sensitive feelings, underneath that anger is something else. Being hurt, being scared, alone, unloved, vulnerable. Underneath anger are very sensitive feelings, but because of masculinity, it's a validated emotion. So anger is allowed for men to channel unmet needs, whereas women, we do the opposite. Women, we can turn the anger inwards because we're not allowed to be angry. We've got to be nice, sugar and spice. We turn that inward. That can be self-criticism. It can turn into anxiety, rumination, or numbness. So what do we mean by how we can deal with anger through mindfulness? Now, mindfulness doesn't work unless you apply the aspect of self-compassion to the anger, because what you have to do is, first of all, you have to kind of go, yes, I'm angry, number one. You have to validate it, especially if you're a woman, and so you don't feel self-critical about feeling it. So it's like, yeah, this is anger, I'm feeling it, it's a totally valid emotion. I want to be heard, I want to be respected, and there is a truth and a logic behind this anger. That's phase one. Number two, exploring the feelings underneath it. What is really underneath that anger? Is it because you feel lonely, because you feel rejected, because you feel hurt, because you feel lost, because you feel scared? These are normal feelings. But really, underneath those soft feelings are the unmet needs. These are the unmet needs I'm talking about when I'm talking about oppressed groups. Was you not believed by somebody? For example, as a child, is the unmet need love? You've not been getting it. You've not been getting respect. You've not been valued. You've not been listened to. And I don't want to go into the realm of trauma, because trauma is the lack of a compassionate witness who doesn't listen to what happened to you, and that causes the isolation, because two parts to trauma is shame and fear. But we're not going to explore today any challenging relationships, any traumatic, or wanting to repair a difficult relationship with a person. There's two sides to the coin, isn't it? Sartre said hell is other people, but Darwin also said, regardless of what all these right-wing, kind of like co-opting kind of narratives there are about the idea of survival of the fittest, we have to cooperate with each other to survive as a human race because of the mammalian instinct, because that's what mammals do. And the thing is with emotions is they're very contagious. You only have to be in a room with another person, and I'm an empathic person. I'm not saying I'm that woman off Star Trek. I'm a highly empathic person and I can pick up other people's emotions incredibly well. So we can be infected by other people's emotions. It's called emotional contagion. That is the psychological word. God, all my psychology is coming back in my head. Whatever you do, don't do A-level psychology or sociology or anything like that, because what it does is it turns you into somebody who speaks too much, like I do. So really, it's all about peeling back unmet needs. So if we're going to do a practice today, I want you to be very, 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 very careful and work with your window of tolerance. If your unmet need is based on a traumatic experience, you're better off exploring this with a professional. You have to work within your window of tolerance. This informal practice that we're going to do in response to working with an unmet need means that you have to choose a mild to moderately difficult relationship. And please be very careful that if any strong, difficult emotion comes up, I want you to feel free to skip this practice. We are doing a gentle turning on of the tap with the drip. We're not going deep dive. We leave that to... I am not a professional. I am trained in yoga therapy, but I'm not a psychotherapist or a counsellor. So we're going to do the practice and experience it, okay, from the point of view that on a scale of 1 to 10, like we did in the last activity, pick a 3, as 1 being positive and 10 being negative. So if you're going to recall being an angry event in a relationship, okay, I want you to think of it being on a 3, okay. Do not choose an experience that's traumatizing or that had lasting psychological scars. Leave that for your professional. Talk to your professional that you want to do a self-compassion based practice around your feelings for a person that you're very angry with. So choose a relationship that's over, not ongoing. It's happened a long time ago where the anger has already been served. The purpose is gone. It has been... You've already let go of it. Does that make sense? You've let go of it. There's no point reliving it. And just find the right relationship and event to work with. So just have a little bit of a think now before we get into our seat and start our practice. We're about 10-15 minutes. This is something you can come back to yourself. But like I said, I don't want anybody to come out of their window of tolerance. So your window of tolerance is, if you're triggered, you can go into the hyper, which is where you're anxious. And if you're going into hypo, you go into freeze. If you will know when this becomes difficult, because something will happen physically in your body before your mind becomes aware. So if you start to feel too much, like in your chest, can't breathe, step away, okay? Always a caveat. I have to have a caveat for this. So, let me get myself into my comfortable seat and let me get my dinger. So have you thought about, on a scale of 3 out of 10 of a situation with a person? So it must be involving a person that you can work with. So if you need to close at any point, what is your resourcing tools? Remember your resourcing tools. 1, breath. Come to your centre of your abdomen and feel the rise and fall of your belly. 2, feel your hands on your thighs and feel the contact between your body and the floor. That's called grounding. So you've got your centering, okay, centering in your belly, grounding, feeling the floor, and orientating. So open your eyes and redirect your focus to something else. You might have something that you like to play with or squeeze. Okay. I know this sounds bonkers, but I've worked with autistic children, and it's using the same techniques based on hypersensitive triggering. Does that make sense? So does that make sense to you? I hope it does. So, shall we get ready? And shall we ring the bell? So find your comfortable seat. So remember, we're looking for a posture. Sorry, it's a bit bright there in my face. We're looking for a posture where we've got that dignity in that pose, but we're relaxed in the upper body. Okay. Cross-legged, hips higher than the knees. So your spine long, and you push your ribs back a little bit. Push your ribs back into space so you don't get any tension in the lower back. Okay. So remember, you have a choice. Eyes closed or soft gaze. If you feel this is emotionally difficult, you open your eyes and redirect your attention somewhere else. Body, breath, orientation. Okay, off we go. Are we ready to begin? So as you find your seat and start to take 3 cleansing breaths, dropping down into awareness of the physical body. And working with the person and the situation that you've chosen for this practice. See if you can remember in your mind's eye as vividly as possible the event in details. And if you can, get in touch with your anger and feeling it in your physical body. Know that this is completely natural for you to feel as you do. And invalidating your anger. Understand that there is a truth and a logic behind it, that it's okay to experience it. You might want to say to yourself, name it to tame it. In that soft, soothing voice, as if you would say to a friend. It's okay to feel angry. You were hurt. This is a completely natural human response. You are not alone. Everybody feels this way. But allow yourself, as you validate it, not to get fully caught up in the storyline of who is right or who is wrong. We're just sensing an awareness and feeling it, remembering the details. There's no need to move from validating to your anger to the point where you need to know who was right and when. If that's the case, then skip this practice. And be kind to yourself. And to recognize that you have been carrying this pain for a long, long time. And come back to it when you're ready. So as we move to the second part of this practice, and if it feels ready for you to move on, and to peel back the anger and see if you can feel behind that hard feeling of anger. What soft feelings are underneath? Try to name it to yourself, if you can, in a gentle, understanding, naming to tame voice. What was it underneath? this is loneliness, or I was feeling scared, or lost, or sad, or rejected. And if this point you feel as though this is just too much, you can just leave the practice right here. Do whatever feels right for you in this present moment. And then if you feel ready to move on to the next stage, see if you can release the person and the storyline of that hurt only for a while. Just let go of the image, the vivid detail. You may have thoughts what was going on in terms of right and wrong, but set those aside. What was the basic unmet need underneath that you had at that time? What was it? Was it because you were not seen? Was it because you were not listened to? Was it because you were not believed? Was it because you didn't feel safe or connected or respected or special and loved? What was that particular need that you didn't get met? Again, try to name it, to tame it in a soft, friendly voice, as if you're showing support for a best friend. Now, if you wish, try to place your hand on your body in a soothing, compassionate warmth and kindly way. Not to make the feeling go away. We're not trying to change anything, but because these feelings are arising. Maybe these are the hands that you wanted to reach outwards. The hands that you wanted to reach outwards to receive care and support from others. These now can become the hands that provide care and support now for you. And even though you wish to have those needs met by that other person you was angry with, that person may have been unable to for their own reasons. But we have another resource, we have ourselves. Maybe you can talk to yourself in the way that you can consider meeting your needs more directly. For example, if you needed to be seen, you can say the words to yourself in a soft, soothing, friendly voice, I see you. If you wanted to be connected, you may say to yourself, I'm here for you. If it was for love, you could say to yourself, you matter to me. if it was to be listened to. It could be the words, I hear you. In other words, you're saying to yourself what you may have been longing for to receive from someone else for a long, long time. And even if you receive these words and there may be disappointment that the other one couldn't meet your needs, is it possible that you can at least meet some of the needs for yourself right now at this present moment? And if you're having trouble doing that, can you also have compassion for it? Can you have compassion for your own pain? Your deepest needs were unmet. And now as you start to let go of this practice, just let everything be as it is. Allow everything to come and go without attaching to any narrative, sounds, emotions, thoughts, sensations. Just be as you are. Just releasing everything. And then just come back to an awareness of the body against the floor, whatever is holding and supporting you. An awareness of your breath coming in and out like a wave. And if your eyes are closed, take some time to gently open your eyes and become orientated in the space, knowing where you are in this place. Okay, so if that has been a challenge, and thinking about how it feels to validate your anger and softening the feelings and having compassion for those unmet needs, I will put a poem up on our page by Desmond Tutu about forgiveness. And if you found that really hard, we will do a practice about forgiveness. At the end of the day, sometimes some people will never know how much they've hurt other people. So it's better to forgive yourself. And we're working with ourselves instead of the other people, because at the end of the day, you can fix or change people. And mindfulness is sometimes an awareness of that. We can work with our own reactions, but that doesn't mean to say that you don't feel. You just still have to validate them rather than suppress them, because, as I've said before, hardening them into resentment, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. But I'll put the Desmond Tutu poem up after this video. It's to his daughter. It's quite interesting because the poem is like, it's almost like he's not ready to forgive, because it's about when it's about his time and when he's ready. So that's an interesting one. It's about working with yourself and forgiving you. It's working with self-forgiveness, really, and working with yourself. That's the important thing, isn't it? The whole part of the self-compassion is we are so self-critical of ourselves. That's the issue. It's quite challenging. So let's look forward to the next session. The next session is, how can you positively turn this anger into a fierce compassion? Can you turn it into something else? And we will talk about forgiveness, and we will do some of that. And the best practice I've found for me, I don't know if, but that everybody's individual, so I'm not going to suspect that anybody would find it good, is working with empathetic resonance, and that's something we'll do next week. So what I mean by empathetic resonance is how we absorb other people's emotions and stuff. But always remember that anger is a protective function. What can you do with it? Boundaries. Okay. How to say no without your ego providing a story. This is the best thing I ever read somewhere. She's called the holistic psychologist. I follow her on Instagram. She's brilliant. She says, don't explain to people why you're putting your boundaries in there. That's your ego wanting to explain. Just, she gives some very, the holistic psychologist on Instagram and Facebook, she gives some really interesting, very clever ways to do self-parenting. Self-parenting is all about working with yourself and working with toxic relationships and working with people who overstep your boundaries and how to reclaim and look after yourself. So we will be talking about that a little bit, and we'll be talking about self-care. Self-care is not bubble baths. Going and get a face pack, getting your nails done, going to Titanic Spa in Huddersfield. You know, self-care is like working with your own self-compassion so that you don't end up giving too much away. You can't give from an empty cup. Refilling your cup. So it will all be interlinked, don't worry. We're going to lead on from this because I don't want to leave this with that toughness of you having to think to myself, yeah, but what about this other person? They're still making me angry because they don't realise what they're doing. I can't remember who said it, but it might have been Maya Angelou. You teach people how to treat you. Okay, you're the one that puts the boundaries in. I hope that makes sense. Okay. If you've ever read Colour Purple by Alice Walker, it's a very, very good book. What she does is she's a victim, the character. If you've watched the film as well, don't like the film. It was done by a white male, and because it's done by a white male, it doesn't. I mean, I wanted to, you know. Celia's character does have a lesbian relationship with Shug the blues singer. But what she does is she eventually teaches people how to treat her with respect without, and she's paralleled to her, to the character played by Oprah Winfrey, would you believe? Now, Oprah Winfrey's character ends up in prison because she gets angry back. I think she gets angry with a white couple who abuse her in the street, and she ends up being the one put in prison. But she's very, very angry, and the anger works against her. It sort of poisons her soul. So she's sort of contrasted to that character. She was really good in it, actually. She was really good in it. Sophia, that's it, the character. So basically, the character played by Whoopi Goldberg, Celie, she shows the men how to treat her with respect, and she does it in a non-violent way. And that's why that coming right all the way back to Black Lives Matter, it's a great book. Read anything by Alice Walker, and any great female black writer, obviously coming from the Harlem Renaissance and things like that. And Marshall Rosenberg being the father of non-violent action, obviously you might want to check that out, because I will be talking about the civil rights movement on Face Compassion on Friday. Well, it's all coming together, isn't that lovely?